next presentation is going to be a little bit different. It's going to have a little bit more audience interaction. So the next presenter, the speaker, is John Carvalho. He's the CEO at Synonym, and it's going to be an Ask Me Anything type of session. And the concept is Bitcoin misconceptions. So he's going to clear that up for you guys. So he's going to do a presentation initially, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. At the end, just raise up your hand if you have a question for John. John's been in the industry for a very long time. He knows a lot of things. And I'll run over to you and give you the mic. So please, everybody, give a round of applause to John Carvalho.
Check. Good afternoon. So as he mentioned, this is about Bitcoin misconceptions. I guess I'll stand over here. As he also mentioned, my name is John Carvalho. I am CEO at Synonym. I'm not here to talk about our company or our products today. I'm here to talk about Bitcoin. But we do happen to have released two new versions of our product. So please check out Pubky.app if you want to try our decentralized social media protocol and application, and Bitkit wallet, which is a self-custodial Bitcoin and Lightning wallet. My intentions are today to contrast Bitcoin memes and culture with being a pragmatic person and acknowledging reality. I want to explain a few of my beliefs and give you a chance to either challenge them or ask questions about them, and we'll have an open QA for that after I do that. The lens that I'm looking at through is to show everyone how memes can have a negative effect on culture and on development and on understanding and education, and show that in the end what really wins is incentives. The narratives within memes or the narratives from influencers and things like this are just that. They're not actual facts or things to design your life around. There are real constraints in Bitcoin that we all have to acknowledge. I do believe in Bitcoin, so keep that in mind as I say things. If any of these things trigger you, Bitcoin is the only thing I'm quote-unquote invested in. I just have a very critical view. I don't believe in using memes as a way to cope or parrot certain phrases as ways to just shut down any sort of criticism, and that often is what happens. I just want to reveal the trade-offs and get you guys to see them the same way that I do. So I'm going to go through 5 different beliefs. Some of you probably already know some of these if you follow me on social media. You may also know other of my more controversial beliefs, and you're welcome to bring those up as well in the Q&A if you like. The first one, hodling is not using. So I think speculation is definitely not as interesting as a lot of Bitcoiners think it is, and I can refute it pretty simply just by saying someone is always holding all of the Bitcoin. There's never somebody not holding the Bitcoin and now you're hoarding it and now it's off the market. It's always there. Somebody always holds it. So when you just sit there and hold the Bitcoin and wait for 10 years and do nothing with it, you're not actually contributing to Bitcoin in any way. The value, the security, even if you're running a node, you're still not contributing. I know that might sound weird to you. Adoption requires people actually using Bitcoin, spending it. Basically, if you're running a node and you're using it to confirm transactions that you're receiving or sending, that's when you're actually making Bitcoin secure and valuable. Lightning will not kill Visa. Many of the startups in the layer 2 scaling Lightning network space industry, whatever you want to call it, they believe and promote the idea that layers can scale Bitcoin not only at all, which is questionable, but also that it can scale it to reach some sort of massive scale like Visa. I would argue that everything at scale probably looks just like Visa, just a little bit different. So you end up having to shift the trust to regulated hubs, and then because Bitcoin is limited in size, it has a limited block space and a limited quantity of blocks over time, it actually limits its size in the real world, the quantity of users that can use it constantly, regularly. And that limits the quantity of people in the Lightning Network or any layer that can actually enforce the rules and the protocol of that layer and not have to trust their counterparty from stealing their Bitcoin from them. Hyperbitcoinization is impossible. I bet most of you don't want to hear that if you know what the word means at least. Hyperbitcoinization is a term that we used a lot in the earlier years of Bitcoin. I'm not sure how often it's used today, but it's just, I guess people have different definitions. It's the concept of using Bitcoin for everything, either using it to pay for everything, using it to price everything, using it to store all value, some sort of massive scale of Bitcoin. It's not actually capable of doing that. This follows the previous slide, just simply because it has a limited amount of block space and a limited amount of blocks over time. So this limits the total amount of activity that it can actually be held inside of it. Bitcoin is not divisible. I know that you all know that there's one BTC and then there's 8 decimal places after it for some reason. Well, there isn't actually a reason because there aren't actually any decimal places in the protocol. And the reason why I have this as both a pet peeve and a misconception, and even went so far as to make a BIP, for those of you who watched the previous presentation, BIP 177, to define how to display Bitcoin correctly in user experiences. And what it really means is Bitcoin, there are 21 million Bitcoin and then 8 zeros, but the problem is there's actually 2.1 quadrillion units, and there is no divisibility at all. You can't add more divisibility, add more zeros, this kind of thing. You would need to do some kind of hard fork or some other solution that would be extremely controversial, like multiplying the quantity of Bitcoins. Because it's an integral system. It doesn't have floating point, it doesn't support decimals, and so we shouldn't support continuing telling people this is how it works because they all think that Bitcoin can do things that it can't, like be divided further. The final topic is that life was better with zero confirmation transactions. I know that they were never safe. I know that merchants had to use special, protocols to be able to limit their exposure just in case customers would steal from them before a Bitcoin transaction was confirmed. But they were able to do that, and we were able to do basically instant transactions in Bitcoin in a much simpler way than we're trying to do today with Lightning Network and now, I guess you could call them layer 3s, like other layers that depend on Lightning Network as rails. I would like to see some sort of revival or intentional handling of zeroconf. I think that the complexity required to make zeroconf safer or safe enough is much, much lower than it is to bootstrap Lightning into the whole world, or Lightning plus Arc plus Spark plus whatever comes next. I do truly believe that removing zeroconf was an intentional thing done by Bitcoin Core, and it actually made Bitcoin less valuable. So this is the Ask Me Anything section. You are welcome to try to refute anything that I said, refute any of my more popular misconceptions if you know me on social media, or just ask questions about any of these 5 topics. And if for some reason you can't, and there's really a burning topic in Bitcoin you want my opinion on, feel free to ask that instead.
Mike, there we go. Tone, you first.
Hey, Tone.
Hey, man. Been a while.
Yeah.
Going back to the Bitcoin Uncensored days. Can you elaborate on how Core removed zero-conf transaction? I must have missed that one. You can still accept a zero-conf. I mean, I do it all the time. I mean, I'm not really scared. You paying me, you're going to double spend it.
There's a nuance there. So if you trust me, then yeah, you don't need anything special to be able to do it. The difference is that at some point, I don't remember how many years ago it was, maybe 3 now, I'm not sure. There was a policy in the mempool that we referred to as first seen, which meant that any node by default would automatically only use the first version of Bitcoin that was sent into the mempool. And if you tried to spend it in a different transaction in a different way, it would just ignore that transaction. Now, this was a trusted sort of thing. In other words, all the nodes just kind of behaved this way as a phenomenon because it was a default setting, basically. And then at some point, there was a few developers that wanted to add basically a way to, I don't know if the right term is like whitewash all of the transactions in the mempool to always be treated as RBF, which means that they automatically always have the capability to be formally replaced by nodes and ignoring the first transaction or previous transactions if there are multiple. And so when mempool for RBF was changed as a default, once 10% or so nodes started running it, it became like that any amateur could double spend. So this meant that if a merchant wanted to offer zero confirmation transactions as basically a service, so you could get pay on chain and get your goods instantly, they didn't really have a reliable way to mitigate their exposure, because even an amateur could double spend anytime they wanted to. Now, technically, it remains true that zero confirmation transactions just aren't safe until they're confirmed, but neither are Lightning ones. You know what I mean? And in the end, the way you enforce all of the Lightning transactions are all off-chain transactions. It's like a really complicated mempool, but nothing is real until you send it on-chain.
Next question. Please raise your hand. There we go. We got a question over here.
Okay, I do agree with you on the zero conf and on the indivisibility. So let's agree that there's 2.1 quadrillion. Does that mean that you don't believe that Bitcoin is scarce?
Well, the quantity of Bitcoin didn't actually change. It was always 2.1 quadrillion. What is scarce is just scarce to you relatively. In other words, resources are about proximity and availability, essentially. And so if you can get the amount of Bitcoin that you need, there's no scarcity as far as your use case, right? And so as long as it's always for sale and you can get some at a price that you agree with, you can just keep doing it. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. Yeah.
Next question.
Hi. I just want to know if you can elaborate a little bit more about the phrase Lightning will not eliminate Visa.
Elaborate more on comparing Lightning to Visa and the scaling aspect?
That's right.
Sure. I want to mention really quickly that I did the math once for your question, and I tried to add up all of the units of all of the currencies in the world, and it came out to less than 2.1 quadrillion. So we could technically fit everything in there. And so as far as Lightning, the idea with layers is that if we do a lot of mutual rules between each other cryptographically, that we can establish a state that we agree on, which is basically we just keep signing transactions over and over until we agree on the final one. And then when we're done being on the Lightning Network or any Bitcoin layer, we take that final one that we both signed and agreed on, and we send it to Bitcoin, and now it's official. The problem with that is all layers require any individual that's participating in them to be able to afford an on-chain transaction in order to have a unilateral or credible exit. And what happens is as Bitcoin becomes filled with activity, the fees go up. And this is an exclusive property. So anybody who has a Lightning channel, say, that has $5 in it, if the fee on-chain transaction fee is $5, that balance just became a trusted balance to some degree. We could debate some of the nuances of whether it's totally trusted or you kind of have a way out if things go a certain way. But in the end, the point of doing the whole layer is because you can, in the end, enforce that you have the amount of Bitcoin you think you have. But in a situation where you have something like 3-4 million people trying to use Lightning, 10 million people on chain, there's no room anymore. The exclusivity just starts going up immediately anytime there's any sort of increase in activity. And this can create a situation where people with much more than $5 can't send a transaction online economically for more than 2 weeks. This makes the whole entire relationship, because this is usually the typical window for a channel for force closing and this kind of thing. And if you can't enforce, that means somebody who can afford to can. And there are various little attacks people can do for analyzing the users that they have channels with and figuring out opportune moments where they could actually steal. And so the risk is basically that the more people we compress into Lightning that is beyond what Bitcoin itself can handle on chain, the more risk you have of having to turn everything into a trusted process. And if we're going to rely on trusted processes to scale Bitcoin, there are much better approaches than how Lightning is doing it.
Okay, since you did the math and there's more Bitcoin than there is money in the world, why can hyperbitcoinization not occur?
For the reasons I was just describing.
Okay.
So basically what happens is somewhere, I'd have to do better research and ask smarter people, but I would guesstimate somewhere around 10 million people active on Bitcoin, like 10 million monthly active users. The fee starts climbing every time you add, no matter what you do. It's just not enough room for anything.
Okay, so that goes into something I heard before too, that in the future, and I may not describe this correctly, that block space will be owned by the quote-unquote big players, and they'll lock it up ahead of time, and you'll somehow have to get into their space?
You
Have you heard that talked
can't
about?
reserve block space, but you can certainly be somebody that can afford it more than somebody else. And so, depending on your perspective, some Bitcoiners will say, no problem, this is great. Only banks can afford to use Bitcoin someday. We all knew that would happen because Bitcoin doesn't really scale. And others will say, that's totally unacceptable. I don't want any type of scaling through banks. I want scaling through Lightning Network, complexity, things like this. The truth is somewhere in between. We can't scale without trust. I would even argue that in our situation, trust is scaling. And so when any type of scale you're actually getting out of Lightning Network or Arc or other layers is based on the trust and coordination of that trust that that layer provides, not the certainties that it provides.
All right, everybody. Does anyone have any other questions? There we go. Question over there. The mic is getting to you.
Thank you. So I would like to debate Hodling is not using. But before that, I would like to understand how you define hodling and using Bitcoin.
Making Bitcoin transactions.
So for you, using is only making transactions?
Or accepting them, yes.
Okay, so in that case, for Bitcoin, I believe for you it might have a value because also of its scarcity, right?
Well, like when we answered earlier, scarcity is a relative thing, right? It's not something that's just covering everybody. It's your situation, whether it's scarce to you. And so what is the context that you want to bring up scarcity?
No, I mean, like, the scarcity touches a point where if something is scarce, it doesn't leak value out. So for me, saving in Bitcoin is using because I transfer value over time, right? If for you, it's not using Bitcoin, then you would you'd be okay to spend it immediately, and you would be storing in anything that just leaks value. For me, also a bucket or a barrel is a good store of value for a liquid. Is not only property is to pour out of it, but store a liquid over time.
Well, you can't really use that kind of metaphor in this situation. And so the store of value, there's no money in there, right? It's just units. And we value them all arbitrarily to what we trust. And so when you want to say, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Please repeat your question, the last part of your question.
In general, I don't agree that hodling is not using, but...
I know what I wanted to say now, sorry. When you bought the Bitcoin or when you sent the Bitcoin, that's when you used it. When somebody sent you the Bitcoin and you verified that transaction in your node, that's when you used it. There's not a continuous usage just because you're not moving it anymore. Everybody is not moving it all the time. There's not a special behavior when you save versus when somebody else saves. There's just a special behavior when you move value from one network or one asset into Bitcoin or out of Bitcoin. And so when you do that, you have to make a Bitcoin transaction, right? So that's when the value actually happens. That's also when the security actually happens, is when you're verifying a transaction and accepting it using the current rules of Bitcoin.
If we remove Bitcoin as a unit, for you as a person, savings, in no matter what, is valuable to you, right?
The use case of saving or speculating on the future is a real use case, yes.
Okay, and valuable to you, right? So the best tool for that would be valuable to you.
The argument isn't that Bitcoin is not valuable. It's that using Bitcoin is what makes it valuable. It's all the people that are using it while you're not that are making it valuable. It's all the people that are buying it after you that make it valuable. It's not this past moment where you move dollars into Bitcoin and thus change the liquidity or economic structure of reality. But when you just hold it, nothing changes. Imagine think of it this way, if all of us only held Bitcoin, what would happen? It would die. There'd be no reason to verify any transactions. There would be no reason to run a node. There would be nobody that accepts Bitcoin because they all have the amount of Bitcoin they want. There'd be nobody to buy Bitcoin from. You can't get more Bitcoin without somebody selling it to you, right? So even when you accumulate, that's when you use Bitcoin.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Tone. We got a question from Tone Vase.
John, since you love controversial topics and giving your opinions, What's your opinion on the current upcoming user-activated soft fork through knots?
The most ignorable event in Bitcoin.
So
I can elaborate if you want, but
no. So my wife, I came out of retirement to do Bitcoin content to cover this topic. So I should have used my time in a better way.
Definitely. I really sincerely believe that we could have totally ignored all of the activity of it, and there would be no difference in outcome in our reality. But there are obviously deeper problems with this movement, right? It's that they want to do very controversial changes to Bitcoin. They're using sort of loose language, like what is spam? What is spam subjective? Is it only transactions I don't like? If we start, and now they start blurring lines as to, are Lightning transactions bad? Or at some point, you have to realize that what's actually happening is they're trying to censor types of Bitcoin transactions they don't like. And nobody is going to get on board with that.
Yeah, that's basically going to be my presentation later today on the main stage, where it's basically identical to the big blocker movement, in my opinion. The only difference is they're able to do it with a soft fork versus a hard fork.
I don't know. I don't know the details of the current fork proposal. I am actually ignoring it. So
okay, got it.
I'm more up on a year ago of the conversation. So yeah.
Thanks.
Any more questions? Got a question in the back? A microphone. Oh, we got 2 questions. Oh my God. Okay. To the lady in the back, and then I'll pass it to you.
Hi. In your experience, what is the biggest challenge to perform more transactions? I mean, in terms of that people will go into these Bitcoin transactions.
So what's the biggest challenge to get people to use Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of ways to answer that. It depends on what you consider success for Bitcoin. Some people consider success just that the price goes up. Some people consider success to be that more applications and merchants support it. There's a lot of different versions of success. But the challenge is simply it has to actually solve problems for people, and they have to actually know that it's a solution to their problems. So it's either marketing, education, or actual product fit. In other words, there are people that don't have Bitcoin problems. There are people that are happy with their investment model as far as their saving and how that will perform for them over time. There are people that are happy with the degree of censorship resistance they have. They maybe are getting good censorship resistance in other ways. And so there has to actually be a need. And the problem that I think, the challenge that I think that we currently have is the culture has shifted drastically towards digital gold and institutionalized Bitcoin with Michael Saylor and all of the different, I forget what they call them, when they hold all the Bitcoin inside of a company and then sell their stock as if it's Bitcoin. This is a real challenge because it just changes the whole narrative from Bitcoin from, oh, it's censorship resistant, nobody can take it from you, you hold your own keys, and it changes it to, you're going to get rich if you do what I do, which is a Ponzi scheme. You know what I mean? And so at some point, the speculation peaks and then it crashes. And we still can tell that Bitcoin is so cyclical, right, for many, many years, its entire lifetime really, that it has a cycle. And that is partially because volatility, because of people just speculating only on price. And so if it really was a long-term investment and everybody needed to hold it all of the time, that wouldn't happen as much, right?
Thanks. Just following from Tone's question, would you support the idea of multiple Bitcoin clients, there being more of them?
Very much. As John before me mentioned, this is something I agree with. I think it's a problem. In my opinion, Knots is ruining that idea because before this spam drama, Knots was serving that role. Wasn't very popular, but it was a place where if people wanted to run a Bitcoin version, that a flavor of Bitcoin Core that had a little bit different configuration or different ability to use it, they had that to go to, and some people did that. But now it's become more of a competition and a controversy and drama, and it feels very much like a psyop to me, honestly. So it's like dirtied the idea a bit. What we really need is some third player, some fourth player that can compete in different ways, that can show, oh, our wallet is amazing. It exposes so many Bitcoin features, so much more than the Bitcoin Core wallet. So I use this Bitcoin Core node because it has a great wallet. Or I use this one because it has a great interface for customizing all of the configurations so I can fight spam and whatever else you believe in with your mempool settings, et cetera, your configuration. But we're not seeing that yet. I think me saying it is maybe an indicator that it might be coming. In other words, it's becoming part of a conversation. So I am still hopeful to see that. Honestly, if I didn't have so much of my own work to do, that would be something I would pursue, would be to say, okay, let me get somebody to fund me to hire a bunch of devs to just make a new client. But that's not what we have at the moment, and I don't know who's going to pick up that torch.
Thanks. I hope that comes. Thank you.
All right, does anybody else have any other questions? Going once? Going twice? Going twice? Tone. You got it. Tone's done. Going twice? Oh, yeah, we got another question. Here we go.
I don't know if this is being brought up already, but I'm just thinking, what are your thoughts on the quantum rising, going to attack Bitcoin or hack Bitcoin?
I would not be as severe as when I was answering Tone, which is I would say you can probably ignore it. From the people that I trust and talk to about things I know nothing about, being quantum physics and such, they say, and you'll even find Bitcoin leaders saying the same thing in social media, that the threat is not imminent, that it's decades away before. And from what I understand, the threat is much worse than to Bitcoin. It's to the whole internet. You won't be able to use the web, to use technology in a safe way, because it would ruin all cryptography. And there might be better things to attack than Bitcoin. Not that they wouldn't, but I know that there are people working on it. I see in the mailing list people talking about different proposals for quantum resistance and this kinds of things. But there's a lot of little nuance there that can be controversial as well. And I don't know that we're going to reach a consensus easily, particularly while probably most of the people feel like the threat is not imminent. But the threat is real if the quantum solutions are real. So far, they're not.
Okay. So we're safe for the next, 10 years?
You're asking the wrong guy, but yes, I'm told decades. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, everybody. More questions? Going once. Going twice. Going twice again. Going 3 times. All right, that's it. Please give a round of applause for John.
Thanks, everyone. If you want to check me out on social media, I'm Bitcoin Error Log on X, and you can also find me in our social media app, pubky.app. Thank you.